Hi there, welcome everyone to our webinar, Bonga Oil Spill, a case study of environmental pollution in the oil-rich Niger Delta, Nigeria. Today we are joined by Dr. Anthony Futige, who is a prolific environmental consultant specialising in pollution, prevention and control, contaminated land assessment and remediation with a focus on sustainability. Anthony was part of a team of consultants involved in dealing with the Bonga 2011 oil spill. In this webinar, he will explain the disaster and the response. As always, there'll be a chance to ask questions at the end of the presentation, so please submit these in the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen at any point during the presentation, and I will ask these on your behalf later on. Thank you for logging in, and I'll now hand over to Dr. Futige.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anthony Esimajimite Futige, and thank you for logging in. And many thanks to Derek for his kind introduction. Sometimes we don't know how far we have come until we paused and perhaps reflect. And many thanks to my assessors who made the recommendation after my chartered environmental assessment. I am very well pleased to be a guest speaker of this IES webinar titled Bonga Oil Spill, a case study of environmental pollution in the oil-rich Niger Delta, Nigeria. The plight of the Niger Delta vis-a-vis oil spills and environmental pollution from air, land, and waterways has been the backbone of my academic and professional career, as highlighted in my biography. I hope to be professional in my presentation and not emotional, but should the latter get the best of me, I pray you excuse me, as I am a core Niger Delta myself, whose ethnic nationality, the Shekiri people of Delta State, which produces over 25% of Nigeria's oil wealth, has absolutely nothing to show for it except continuous pollution, environmental degradation, and abject poverty. So my presentation outlines include introduction, and I'll talk you through the Niger Delta being the world oil pollution capital, and we'll look at the chronology of the Bonga oil spill and how I critique the Bonga oil spill, its response, and cleanup claims from Shell management, and highlight some of our results in the community-led Bonga oil spill post-impact assessment, and also highlight some Bonga oil spill impacts on riverine communities. And hopefully we'll draw the curtain. Ken Saro-Wiwa was a Nigerian writer, television producer, environmental activist, and winner of the Right Livelihood Award for exemplary courage in striving non-violently for civil, economic, and environmental rights, and the Goodman Environmental Prize. He was a voice against environmental degradation and pollution in the Niger Delta and Ogoniland in particular. Ken Saro-Wiwa's non-violent campaign against multinational oil companies, especially the Royal Dutch Shell, and outspoken criticism of the Nigerian government led to his death by hanging in 1995, after being allegedly found guilty by a special military tribunal of the gruesome murder of Ogoni chiefs at a pro-government meeting. His execution by the military detector of General Sani Abacha provoked international outrage and led to the suspension of Nigeria from the Commonwealth for over 3 years. And since then, the Shell has been banned from operating in Ogoniland since 1993 to date. And according to Ken Saro-Wiwa, environmental pollution is an ecological war in which no blood is spilled, no bones are broken, no one is maimed. So few are alarmed, but men, women, and children die. Flora, fauna, and fish perish. Air, soil, and water are poisoned. And finally, the land and its inhabitants die. Introduction. The Niger Delta in Nigeria is the world's second largest delta, third largest wetland, and the largest in Africa. The Niger Delta region exemplifies a strong, long-standing connection between people and the environment. Since the advent of crude oil discovery in 1956, the Niger Delta region has been Nigeria's economic backbone, with an estimated $600 billion revenue generated from oil, accounting for over 90% of the country's total foreign exchange revenue. As a member of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, since 1971, Nigeria has Africa's largest natural gas reserve and second largest oil reserve, making it the primary oil producer in the continent. There are 4 non-functional oil refineries in Nigeria with an estimated total refining capacity of over 4,000 barrels per day. The region has about 606 oil fields, with 355 and 251 situated onshore and offshore respectively, with 5,284 drilled oil wells and 7,000 kilometers of oil and gas pipelines as at 2006. Niger Delta, world oil pollution capital. Environmental pollution in Nigeria, Niger Delta in particular, from incidents spanning over 60 years, is far more pervasive than previously acknowledged and has generated global attention. According to a BBC report by DoFeed in 2010, Nigeria was branded the world oil pollution capital. Ongoing activities, including vandalization of oil pipelines by indigenous inhabitants, corrosion due to aging pipelines, oil blowout from flow station, sabotage coupled with oil theft, which is currently making the news. Just last month, there was a sensational revelation that oil theft has been going on a global scale for over 9 years on a facility that is operated by Shell. And of course, illegal bunkering, inadequate care in loading and offloading of oil vessels in the region. All of these continue to release substantial amounts of crude oil and refined products into the fragile ecosystem. A typical conceptual site model, as depicted above, showing the sources, environmental pollution and transport in the region. One of the most obvious is gas flaring, and it has been a constant source of air pollution, with soot settling on rooftops, gardens, cars, vegetation, even on humans. It has been referred as a black snow by Bloomberg UK. And of course, the health impacts are well documented, especially when they get into the airways, damaging the respiratory system. So despite all of these huge resources, as depicted, the oil producing communities are still living in abject poverty, and yet they suffer from all the environmental degradation. And this has led to agitation, militancy, and unrest in the Niger Delta. And Bonga oil spill is another example of one of these sources, which is the focus of this presentation. Chronology of Bonga oil spill. Bonga is a floating production, storage, and offloading FPSO vessel located 120 kilometers off the Nigerian coast. Crude oil evacuation from the field is through a subsea manifold and flow line system connected to the FPSO. The FPSO has a processing capacity of over 200,000 barrels per day, with a storage capacity of 2 million barrels, making it one of the largest FPSOs in the world. It is on record that a massive spill of crude oil was accidentally introduced offshore at Bonga oil facility on the 20th of December, 2011, which was one of the worst oil spills in the fragile Niger Delta coastal area for over a decade. The Bonga oil field is operated on behalf of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, by Shell Nigerian Exploration and Production Company, which has 55% ownership, followed by ESSO Exploration and Production Nigeria, which has 20% ownership, Nigerian Egypt Exploration with 12.5% ownership, and Elf Petroleum Nigeria Limited with 12.5% ownership. It was reported by Shell that during a routine transfer of crude oil in a waiting tanker, a rupture of an exporting line linking the FPSO and the said tanker resulted to a massive 440,000 barrels of crude oil spilled into the Niger Delta environment. The crack in one of the 3 lines was identified as head 325, having a depth over 400 meters, according to Shell. Here is a shaded relief and seafloor topography map showing Bonga oil field in relation to impacted riverine communities offshore. I'm still on the chronology. Shell stopped the flow of oil into the tanker upon discovery of the ongoing spill and activated its oil spill response procedure and emergency response team, in addition to informing concerned agencies. On the 21st of December 2011, the crude oil spill was left uncontained, and ENVISAT ASA satellite radar image, courtesy of the European Space Agency, showed a large, clearly visible slick of about 70 kilometers long, that's 45 miles, and 17 kilometers wide at its widest, that's about 10 miles, and covered 923 square kilometers, about 356 square miles of the Niger Delta marine environment, as shown on the slide. However, the only thing Shell did was to shut in its Bonga oil facility completely. An ineffective vessel dispersant application was carried out on the 22nd of December 2011 with an exaggerated natural dissipation, causing Shell's self-acclaimed 50% reduction in spill size. However, when they realized this was not effective, airborne dispersant operation began on the 23rd and 24th of December 2011. This massive uncontained spill, coupled with thousands of tons of hazardous chemical dispersant by name Coexit 9500, 9527, and Slick Gun NS, break down Bonga oil slick into large visible patches of crude oil and was moving fast into the shorelines of unsuspecting riverine communities located at the Niger Delta shoreline. A modest terra satellite image taken on the 23rd of December 2011 confirmed pale patches of ocean water about 18 kilometers offshore. And due to the wind speed and direction over the past couple of days at 5 to 10 knots, this finally got to hit the shorelines. However, Shell claimed on the 25th of December 2011 that the effectiveness of the emergency response was clear, that the oil leak from Bonga had largely dispersed. And this was their famous line. And in the series of interaction I had, I've always asked a counter question, which was dispersed to where? And in response, I famously say dispersed to the adjacent community here present at the time. So critiquing Bonga oil spill, response, and dispersion claim. From precedents, we know that the oil companies, especially the multinational companies, are not known for telling the truth when it comes to the amount of oil spilled into the environment. And so we didn't take Shell by its word, and we did our own investigation. And from reliable sources, we were able to get the nominated quantity of the said tanker, which was about 1 million barrels. And there were 2 attempts to fill that tanker. The first one took place on the 19th of December, 2011, with over 600,000 barrels on board. So it was when they noticed that the time that this tanker should be filled, and it wasn't, and they decided to check. That was when the Bonga oil spill was spotted. The second attempt was on the 1st of January 2012, and we gathered that over 6,000 barrels was also on board. And so what we did was to add the 2 attempts, and that gave us over 1.3 million barrels. And we subtract the nominated quantity from that, and we're looking at a spill of 311,000 barrels. We also found out that venting from the ruptured exporting line linking the FPSO and the vessel was about close to 300,000 barrels. So in addition, combining these 2 together, we're looking at a massive spill that is less than 600,000 barrels. And this is typical of the Niger Delta. So normally when things like this happen, they try to underreport the spill so as to absorb themselves from being fined and from compensation claims. And yeah, this is typical of the Niger Delta. So one of the things I did was to look at their map showing the proposed PIA sample point. So I used a conceptual model using source battery receptor model to try and convince everyone present that this spill of this magnitude could not be in place without hitting the shoreline. So please excuse my animation. It was the best I could produce in 2013 when I carried out a series of presentations to both the National Assembly, Federal House of Representatives, and State House of Assembly, Delta State. And this presentation was key to both the national and state emergency management agencies delivering relief materials to impacted communities, which I personally received on behalf of the impacted communities. So I simulated the response by Shell. And so this was applying the air dispersant. And so one of the things I raised was that nobody was talking about the air pollution that Shell, in the course of their response, has caused the Niger Delta people. So again, another thing I did was to look at the mechanism of action of the dispersant Shell used. And I've used similar dispersant, but in this case, biosurfactant, which is more environmental friendly. I produced one in my master's research, and in my PhD research, I acquired one and use it to in my research. So the mechanism of surfactant, basically, they have hydrophilic head and hydrophobic tail. The hydrophilic head attached to the water body, and the hydrophobic tail attached to the crude oil, and creating this fragment, which would seem to be like it's been emulsified. And so this was where Shell claimed that the remediation has been successful. Again, in one of our meetings, Shell did claim that the crude oil that impacted riverine communities was not from the Bonga oil spill, and that it was from a mystery spill. At that point, I objected, and I drew the attention of the Honorable Minister, who was the chairman and whose department has the oversight function of the environment, oil and gas. And I brought a letter that was in our custody, which was written by Chevron. And in that letter, Chevron was, they said they observed some crude oil patches in their Escravos operating area. And as you can see, the Escravos operating area is just less than 10 kilometers away from the community. And they said in their oversight function, initially they thought perhaps one of their facilities had a leak. And when they did their surveillance, and they realized that it was from the Bonga oil spill. So at that point, I brought out that letter because it was written to the Minister of Environment. And that was a point Shell tucked their tails in between their legs. Yeah, so again, this is typical, and using the pollution linkages, I was able to convince everyone present that a spill of this magnitude that was not contained and cannot be in place without impacting the riverine communities. So considering how this has been panning out, the communities were not really confident on Shell's post-impact assessment. So we had a community-led post-impact assessment, and I was one of the lead team of consultants on behalf of the impacted communities. So I'll just share some of our results. So here is showing total petroleum hydrocarbon distribution in sediment from the chemically dispersed Bonga oil spill in 2012. And interestingly, before Bonga oil spill in 2004, TPH was 10 milligram per kilogram in sediment. And the Department of Petroleum Resources target limit is 50 milligram per kilogram, and intervention limit is 500 milligram per kilogram. And here what we are seeing, it's a maximum of 10,500 milligram per kilogram and a minimum of 3,000 milligram per kilogram. Again, this was the trend with pHs. The background pHs from sediments as at 2004 was 0.02 milligram per kilogram. And the target limit was less than 1 milligram per kilogram, and intervention limit was 40. However, from our post-impact assessment, we are getting as high as 100 milligram per kilogram. So the same thing with TPH in surface water. Before Bonga, it was less than 1 milligram per liter, and the WHO target limit is 0.3 milligram per liter. And we're getting as high as 60 milligram per liter. The same thing for pHs. And this just shows how day by day environmental pollution continues, and the impact is left for the host communities to deal with. So Bonga oil spill impact on riverine communities. The environmental impact cannot be overemphasized. Like I did say, the atmospheric pollution was highlighted. And we know with this kind of massive spill, it suffocates marine life and also contaminates food chain. And the tar balls hitting the shorelines also contaminated fishing gears and massively affected aquatic lives. The health impact has been well documented. We know there's serious health impact related to oil-related activities, like the gas flaring has a lot of impact on respiratory system, and kidney, liver, and heart problems are now more frequent in the Niger Delta. Unfortunately, we don't have good healthcare system. And so when people die mysteriously, nobody actually find out to know the cause of death. And this has affected the people of the Niger Delta severely, and their lifespan has been drastically impacted. Of course, this also has economic impact. The Bonga crude oil spill drastically affected the fishing industry in all the impacted communities due to disturbed fishing activities of local fishermen and women. It has also devalued the economic potential of the communities, coastal vegetation, mangrove forests, and other rich and diverse mosaic of ecological types as tourist destination. I remember I painted a picture in one of my presentations. I said, if nothing is done to stop this monumental scale of pollution, it will turn out that a young boy who went fishing will tour the whole riverine area, the whole waterways, only to catch this size of fish after he's become a grown man. So yes, this is again typical of the environmental pollution in the Niger Delta. So in conclusion, we discovered that just over 6% of the actual Bonga oil spill was reported by Shell. And of course, compensation is ongoing. Some communities are in court. Recently been taking Shell to international court and demanding for compensation. So yes, this is typical of the Niger Delta. And one fascinating thing about the Niger Delta is that when you think you've seen it all, it will revent itself and throw even more severe headlines that will make previous incidents look like child's play. So now we are talking about a massive oil theft, you know, from a terminal, a major terminal that is operated by Shell. And this has been going on for over 9 years. So yes, in my own humble opinion, I think, and I believe strongly that it would seem that the resources of the Niger Delta has been weaponized against them. as everyone benefits from this wealth, but the people of the Niger Delta. Thank you.
That was a great, thank you for that. We have one question in the box. If you have any more questions, please put them in the Q&A function. I have a quick question, Anthony. Do you know what kind of steps have been put in place by Shell to stop this from happening again?
Sadly enough, there's nothing, absolutely nothing. I think we have regulatory agencies that are not very efficient. They don't even have the means to do an independent investigation. So I think it's like a free for all, really. And to be quite honest, this has been ongoing. When I did my came up with a novel, sustainable remediation technology to clean up contaminated land. And I was quite excited. That paper has been accepted for publication. And so I was like, oh, we've got something that we can implement. But when I did a qualitative survey, I realized that there are other challenges, that makes any remediation attempt to be almost impossible. Should you start a remediation right now, there's every likelihood that the next day that same site will be recontaminated.
Okay. Okay, that answers one of the questions. Are there any other cleanup operations happening or going to happen? So that kind of answers that. And there's a question here. Clearly, the oil spill should not have happened in the first place. Given that it did, what were the shortcomings of the oil spill response actions, and how could they have been more effective?
To be quite honest, what the multinational agency have been doing before now, they would just do some remediation and put it on paper that they have remediated impacted land. And because the communities don't have the expertise to validate whatever claim. So sometimes you think sites that have been cleaned up, they're actually cleaned up. However, in 2011, the then president of Nigeria commissioned United Nations Environment Program to undertake an independent assessment of the Ogoni land, using that as a case study for other communities in the Niger Delta. And shockingly, the report came out and said most of the sites that this multinational organization claimed to have been remediated were grossly impacted, and the people are still suffering the effect and impact from the so-called remediated land. So you can't really take them by their words. It's just how it's been played in the Niger Delta, unfortunately.
There's someone asking here, approximately how long will the effects of the oil spill be mitigated into insignificant level?
That's a very good question. In that assessment that United Nations Environment Program did, they estimated that just with Ogoni land alone, it would take over 30 years to remediate the contaminated land in Ogoni land. And they estimated that the first 5 years would cost about $1 billion US. And of course, concerned regulatory agencies and governmental bodies, that is not the direction that they want to go.
Mm-hmm. Another question is here, were there any community action aside from your efforts?
That's a very reasonable question. To be quite candid, I think we've been so abused that even when you are genuinely fighting for environmental justice, it's more of stomach infrastructure, it's more of what you can immediately benefit. So, and of course, I wouldn't blame them because according to Chinua Achebe in his famous book, Things Fall Apart, he said, when the hunters learn how to shoot without missing, the birds learn how to fly without perching. So over the years, communities are even happy for their lands to be impacted because that will give them an opportunity to claim for compensation. And that is the only way, if they succeed, that they will benefit from the oil activities that are going on in their region. So it's quite something that I believe has been weaponized against them, really.
I have another one here that's, so it says, thank you, Anthony. I'm also from the Niger Delta region of Nigeria, and this is what spiked my interest in studying an MSc in Environmental Management at Brunel University of London. This data dates back to 2013. I am more concerned because the Ogoni community is not entirely free, and the state of environment is not improving a decade later. Knowing that more spills and environmental pollution are increasing, a lot of management techniques and technologies have been developed. So the question is, are there known reasons why the situation has remained unchanged? And the Bongo spill is over a decade. Are there statistical data to show the impact over time?
I think when I did a quick search, a group of people has just taken Shell to a UK court, saying that they are now coming to the realization of the impact of the Bonga oil spill. And this is as recent as February 2022. So like I said, it's there's no unifying effort because one of the techniques Shell use is divide and control. So they manipulate the communities against each other. Sometimes they settle out of court, sometimes they pay, sometimes they use the community against themselves. So really, that has made it even challenging. And considering the fact that Ken Sarua was killed just because he was demanding for environmental justice, and nothing has happened. The highest the international community would do is to be appalled and all of that. So everybody is actually watching their back because these multinational companies, they are powerful and they have the Nigerian government at their back, you know, with all the military might. So it's quite something that you have to weigh the pros and cons, really.
And what was the government's reaction to the to this?
Yeah, the Bonga oil spill, the concerned regulatory agencies, in this case, NOSRA, they fined Shell, I think 3.5 billion US dollars, and that it's the penalty, you know, and the communities are pushing for their compensations as well. So like I said, when things like this happen, everybody's looking for what is in for them. So regulatory agencies want to get the fines and fill in their pockets, and communities too be looking for how to get compensation. So I think the force is like a battle between David and Goliath, really.
There's another question here. So it says a detailed presentation. My question is on the field data gathering and the analysis. The data on sediments and surface water, was it funded by you or the communities?
Yeah, like I said, reports like that are falsified, and these are done deliberately. I'm sure we get some consultant from universities that are in their good books, and they will doctor reports to favor Shell. And so when we did our own reports, it was the group of communities impacted across multiple states. And so we came out with our own findings. And of course, we had experts in their different fields. And just to make sure that we have an alternative narrative, if that makes sense.
Do you know if any of the any other areas were impacted further inland than just on the coast?
I think pollution in the Niger Delta, it's multifaceted. So you are bombarded through the air, land, waterways. So on daily basis, it's you can't really pinpoint one source. So it's something that's quite dynamic, in my own opinion.
Perfect. That's it for there are still a few questions, but we've run out of time. Thank you for answering that. Very, very interesting presentation. So attendees, that's it from us today. Thank you for logging in. I hope you found it beneficial and informative.